Hello everybody and welcome back, and now let us start off by trying to exploit our first target, which would be our OWASP virtual machine. So I'll just close this, which was from the previous video. We do not want to save it. Let us just go onto our virtual machine and also go to the once again to the then vulnerable web application, which is DVWA. Once you get there, if it asks you for the login screen, just type there admin and it will open up this window. From there, you just go to the Sql injection right here. So, as in the previous command injection tutorials, SQL can also be used to query with the get method. So, if you have a source code to the website, you can easily see if it is vulnerable to the Sql injection, but in most cases you won't have the source code. Right here we do have it, as we can see if we click right here on the view source. You will see the source code of this website, and we can see our SQL query, which is right here. So we will get to this a little bit later on. For now on, let us just see what this website is all about. So as we can see, we get prompted with the user ID. So user ID could possibly be some kind of a number. So let us just type here 1 and submit it, and we will get the first name and the last name or surname for the user ID under the number 1. If we type here user ID 2, we will get the user ID under the number 2. So that would be Gordon Brown. So we can conclude that this website is basically giving the first and last name based on the user ID that you typed right here. Now let's try here 32, for example. There probably isn't. So as we saw, if you type here 32, it won't give out any output since there isn't a user under the ID of 32 or 33. I don't know what I typed, I forgot, it doesn't really matter. So let us continue. Now, it all seems good for now, but what happens if we type here a special character that is used in programming languages, for example? Now, we can cheat right here and type and view the source code, but the basic check, the most basic check for the SQL injection is always the apostrophe, a single apostrophe. Now, in most cases, once you type this, it will, if the server is vulnerable to the SQL injection, it will print out an error. It will say that there was an error in the SQL query, and let us just check that out. If I click here on submit, you will see we get some weird error that says you have an error in your Sql syntax. Check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL server version for the right syntax to use near this at line 1. Now, if you see this on any website, it means it is vulnerable to the SQL injection, because this error means that we actually entered something that messed up with the server's code. And it even says it right here that we have an error in Sql syntax. Now, that error basically is the 3 apostrophe one next to another. So, in order to explain that a little bit better, let me just go here and on view source, let me enlarge this, we can see that this is our SQL syntax. We can see that basically, as I explained in the previous video, it selects first name and last name from users where user ID equals, and then here it types any input that we typed in the user ID form. So for example, if we type there 2, it would print out 2, the information about user under ID 2. And you can see that the ID has the apostrophe from the left side and apostrophe from the right side, which means that the user input is anything between these two apostrophes, which is good. But what happened when we typed another apostrophe? It happened that this basically, let me just show you, let me copy the entire command, let us copy it, and let us open a leafpad. So I already had it open, so I will just open once again and paste the command right here. when we typed user under ID 2, it looked like this. When we typed user ID 1, it looked like this. But once we typed the apostrophe, we had these 3 apostrophes, and it counted first 2 as the part of the query, and the last one was basically SQL didn't know how to interpret the last apostrophe, and it gave us an error. An error in syntax in SQL language, which means that it actually read our apostrophe as a part of the code. And that's how we know that it is vulnerable to the SQL injection. So, let me just open this. Now, and most of the time you won't have this code, but you can actually try to guess how the code might look like based on the website itself. So we could actually guess, once we type here 2, we know that it queries for the first name and the last name from some table with users where ID equals 2. Now that we know that it is vulnerable, we can actually try a few of other things. So let us try to actually type here 2 and add the apostrophe, which would end the first, which would be the correspondent to the first apostrophe in the source code. So let us keep the source code right here. So for now on, it is select first name, last name from users where user ID equals 1 apostrophe, then 2, then second apostrophe, and then we can check right here, for example, and, which is a SQL syntax, and 1 equals 1. Now, let me just delete the last apostrophe since we already have it specified in the source code. What this does is basically it will check for a condition if 1 equals 1, which is always true, and it shouldn't give us any error. If you just paste this in the instead of the ID, you will see that it is a good written syntax for the SQL, and it shouldn't give us an error. It will print out the ID of username 2, and it will not print anything else. So if we just type here submit, you can see that it just printed the Gordon Brown, which is the username under ID 2, and it also checked if 1 equals 1, and since that is true, it didn't give us any error. But let's do the same thing, and instead of 1 equals 1, we type here 1 equals 2. Now, since this is not correct, 1 is not equal to, it will not print out anything. So basically it won't print out the Gordon Brown or anything else. If you click here submit, you will see that it doesn't give us any information, since it would only print out the username under ID 2 if the second condition was also met, which it wasn't, since 1 is never equal to 2. Now you might be asking, let me just type here, why am I not using the apostrophe at the beginning and at the end? Well, basically I already have those 2 apostrophes in the source code. As you can see right here, it starts off with the apostrophe, and then we just type here 2, and then the second apostrophe and 1 apostrophe, then 1 second apostrophe equals, and then another opening apostrophe 1, and we have the closing one right here, so we do not have to type it. If we were to type it, we would get another syntax error, since we have another apostrophe which shouldn't be there, as we can see right here. We have a few extra apostrophes, so we do not type the apostrophe at the end. Now that we saw how this works, let us actually try to find out how many rows and columns and tables and all that kind of stuff are there, in order for us to get to the valuable stuff, which would be usernames and passwords. So in order for us to find out the existing number of columns, we should type here this command. So we delete basically anything. Let's just delete all. So we type here 2 apostrophe, and then we use the command order by, and then we type here 1. Now what this means is this will try to find the existing number of columns. This order by one will basically see if there is one column, and we will just go one order by one, order by two, order by three, and once it doesn't give us anything, it means that there is not a column under that number. Now after this, what we want to do is type here hashtag. Now you might be asking, why are we typing the hashtag now? Well, basically hashtag is the comment in the SQL language. So anything that comes after the hashtag is interpreted as a comment. So we type here hashtag and then apostrophe, and if we type right here, we can see that the column 1 exists. Now let us try to see if there are two columns, for example. So we type here the same command, but instead of 1 we want to check out 2. Does that exist as well? And it does. And let us try to find out about the third column. Does the third column exist in the database? And if we type right here, it will say unknown column 3 in order clause, which means our database only has 2 columns for now. Third one doesn't exist, and that's why we get this error. Now that we found out how many columns are there, we can basically try to select them both and see what they are. We want to see, for example, in which order are these columns, and we do that with this SQL query, which is 2. And basically, maybe I didn't mention, but this 2 is the ID for the Gordon Brown, I believe, guy. And we use that so we can specify another command after that, so it gives us our desired output. So we will use union select 1 and then comma 2 and then hashtag apostrophe. Basically this will give us in which order are these columns, these 2 columns that we found out. If we, for example, found out that there were 3 columns right here, we would just type here another comma and then 3. But since we only have 2, we just type here 1 comma 2, and we can see right here that the first name is the column number 1 and the surname is column number 2. Now this union command right here that we used, basically it is used to gather results from 2 queries, as we can see right here. So we will continue. We basically just found out some of the basic things right here, but we will continue to exploit it in the next tutorial. So I will just cut the tutorial here and we will continue from where we stopped right now, and I hope I see you there, and take care. Bye.